Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. At Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relations through personal and professional development. I am Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer at the Center for Victory, here today with Vistage Chair Extraordinaire, Mr. Dick Singer, one that is near and dear to my heart, a great friend over the past decade. This month, we've been talking about leading into the new year. Dick's here to talk about what he believes leaders need to be more intentional about, what makes a good leader, and what we need to look for going into the next decade as far as leadership goes. Just a little bit about you, Dick, if we could get started. I've got lots of stories about you. 10, 11 years ago, I sought you out and begged to be in one of your groups. Heard about you. There were rumors of this man that could help companies and help people get more focused on what they do. And I still remember where we actually met. Very impactful. But you've made a big impact on my life, on my business. And if anybody here is listening that has been impacted by us, this man has impacted me to help everybody to do that. So can you just give a little introduction about your background, Dick, and everything that in your experience?
Well, very briefly, I spent over 30 years in the broadcasting industry, primarily in television, but for about 8 of those years, I was a partner and owned a group of small market radio stations, learned about what running a business at the gut level is all about, came very close to personal bankruptcy in that endeavor. And then went back into, we were able to sell the stations, fortunately, went back into the television side of the business in management, was a manager of a group of TV stations. And then literally came to Pittsburgh as a regional manager for a broadcasting company. And then shortly after 9/11, got fired. I had a college professor who once said, "You haven't lived until you've been fired." And I am here to tell you that he is absolutely right. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Through a series of networking meetings, I found out about Vistage, which at the time was called TEC, which stood for the Executive Committee, and really was intrigued and taken by the whole mission of Vistage, which is to enhance the lives of leaders of companies and make them more impactful and effective, and decided to become what they call a Vistage chair, chairing groups of CEOs and executives, helping them to be better people and better at what they do and more impactful to their employees. And I've been doing that for 16 years here in the Pittsburgh region. And I love what I do. I work with great people, and I facilitate monthly meetings for these groups. And I have seen people like you, Eric, really grow in their roles and grow their companies and grow as people. So it's been a very exciting run for me.
Yeah, I mean, what you do is amazing to think about. I mean, you're like the ultimate chief squirrel chaser. I mean, you have all these CEOs and business owners in one room, and it's your job to herd them and give them direction. And it's an amazing thing. And I've just seen so much growth out of that. And really that has been key. That the mentorship that you've given in the group and the people that you've put me with I can't say enough about that. But getting into that a little bit, talking about leadership, because you've seen it all. I mean, you see every industry, small business, large, medium size. How would you describe someone who is a good leader? What attributes, characteristics, and things?
I think first and foremost, a good leader is a good listener. I think a good leader has to listen with intent attention. I think they have to try to understand where their people are coming from. Um, you know, people use the term boss. To me, boss is really more of an acronym. And the acronym stands for boorish, obnoxious, and self-serving. Uh, and I really believe that. I think people who think of themselves as the boss or a boss are exactly that. Um, I think a good leader knows that there are things that they don't know and are inclined to surround themselves with people who can fill in where their weaknesses are, fill in for their weaknesses, um, and are willing to be wrong, to admit that they're wrong, are willing to take chances. I think you really have to be willing to kind of go out on the limb a little bit to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And I think they need to surround themselves with the kind of people that can help them get there. And the biggest issue that I see with leaders of companies and managers in companies is when they have underperforming employees, they wait way too long to do something about it, and they spend way too much time dealing with that employee instead of making the changes that need to be changed. We have a saying, if you can't change the people, change the people. And that's, you really have to think about looking at your business that way. You have to do, in my opinion, I think you have to do your number one, your decision making should be based on what's the best thing for the company. How can I best serve the company? How do my people best serve the company?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we're looking at that and you say somebody's listening to this right now.
Yeah.
When I came to you, I was, I wanted to improve. I didn't know all that I was getting into, but I knew enough to bother you enough to say, hey, look, I need some help here. How can somebody go about improving their leadership?
Well, I think they, first of all, I think they have to understand, as you did, and I think the thing that really struck me about you when we first met, those first two meetings, was that you knew that there were a lot of things that you didn't know, and you wanted to learn those things, and you weren't sure what those things were, but you knew that there were things that you needed to learn.
Sometimes I still don't know.
Well, it's all about lifelong learning, right? And I think that I think a leader, I think that's really critical for a leader. I think a leader really needs to understand that there are things that they don't know. There are things that they have to learn. It's not a question of knowing that they don't know, or excuse me, it's not a question of not knowing. It's a question of knowing that they don't know, and wanting to learn, and being a lifelong learner, and being able to change with the times. We had a conversation with some people the other day. We were talking about 20 or 30 years ago, we didn't have social media.
Right.
Social media has changed the whole perception of how we do things. If you do something, if you make a mistake today, it can be on social media within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So you have to be a lot more observant of what goes on in your company and in your own person. And I think you have to be a lot more aware of what's going on around you and what's going around in the social media. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert on it, but you need to be aware of it.
Yeah, and I want you to kind of maybe toot your own horn here, but I think it's important to talk about the whole idea of mentorship, and if somebody wants to really improve, if you want to escalate that improvement, I really believe you need to reach out to somebody and have that consistency of that mentorship, like I've had with you for the past decade. Can you give a couple tips on that?
Well, one of the one of the newer programs we have at Vistage is called Emerging Leaders, and that's for, excuse me, second, third, and fourth tier managers who companies look at and say, hey, there's a future leader of our company. And what happens is that they recognize that, but then they don't do anything to help them become a leader. And so Vistage has created this program called the Emerging Leaders Program, which is really a classroom setting. It's a 2-year program. And one of the things that the people who are in this group, there's 23 people in this group right now, one of the things that each of those 23 people has to do is find a mentor. And the mentor can't be their boss. It's got to be somebody. It could be their boss's boss, but it can't be their boss. But I firmly believe that every company should have a mentorship program. I remember my years in the broadcasting industry. One of the things that I enjoyed probably more than anything else that I was doing was mentoring people, helping people to really get to where they wanted to go, especially in the sales realm, which was really my focus. And I think every company should have a program where, number one, they teach people how to be mentors, because this is not something you just become. You've really got to learn how to do that and do it properly, and create these programs for their incoming employees, especially the ones who are in the lower management and supervisory roles, who are thrust into a role. And I'll give you a good example because it happened to me. I was a salesman selling television advertising in Philadelphia. And I got promoted to become the sales manager of the station that this company owned in Cleveland. So on Friday, I was a salesman in Philadelphia. And on Monday, I was a sales manager in Cleveland. And I have to tell you that on Saturday and Sunday, there was no great epiphany. There wasn't a light that shined down from above that said, okay, here's how you do this. Suddenly I was just thrust into this role, and there was really no training for it. Yeah. And I will tell you, looking back on it, that I was not very good at it, especially in the beginning, because I was the boorish, obnoxious, self-serving boss. And I'm embarrassed when I think about it. But the point is that had there been the proper kind of mentorship program, you can learn a lot by observing people. There's no question about it. And I observed good and bad managers as I was growing up in that business. But having somebody who can kind of take you aside and say, look, here's the way these things work. And you have to look at people. Every person is different. And certainly, Eric, that with the PI, every person, you have to deal with every person in a different way. You have to try to understand how they operate and what makes them tick. And that's, to me, that everybody was the same back then. Yeah. And everybody had to be treated the same way. It was not the way to be a manager. It just wasn't. And I think when you have a mentorship program and you have trained mentors on your staff, number one, you can do a lot more to help people in your company grow. But that also, I think, keeps people in your company. I think it really creates an atmosphere and a culture where people want to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've even incorporated some of the things that we've learned through Vistage and your guidance and mentorship internally here. And I was a one-man show.
You are.
when I came to you, and now now we have a dozen people inside the company. It's just like, wow, that happened. That was intentional. It just didn't happen overnight, but it happened with process and good mentorship, which leads me to my last question for you. Going into this new decade, what do leaders need to be looking at going into this next decade from your perspective?
Well, I think to some extent they need to do a little bit of rear view mirror stuff, because we're 10 years out from a pretty significant recession. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of companies have forgotten the lessons they learned from that recession. And I think they need to go back and relook at what they did, how they operated, what they learned, and prepare themselves, because there's gonna be another recession. It may not be as dramatic as what we saw in 2008, 2009, 2010, but there's gonna be one. And I think if you go into that prepared, which means making sure that your cash position is strong, um, making sure that you are running your organization as efficiently as you can, and that you are looking at new markets to explore. I think you can survive that. If it's business as usual, you may not survive it. So I think that's one thing. I think that's really, really critical. And my experience says to me that tells me that a lot of companies have forgotten the lessons that they learned in those 10 years ago. Uh, I think with the millennial generation will become the majority of our workforce in the mid-20s. I think we need to learn how they operate and what they do and how they work. I think I think the way that we have handled employees, we have treated employees in the past may not be the same way we want to work with millennials. And whether you like it or not, that's going to be our workforce.
Yeah.
And they think a little differently. They operate a little differently. They want to work for companies that have a why, as you always talk about having the why. There's a lot more emphasis now on working from home as opposed to being in the office. I think companies have to really look closely at how they do that and how they structure that. Excuse me. And I think, especially the people who are in leadership positions today, really need to be looking at what the succession is going to be in their company. I ran into somebody about a month and a half ago, talking to them about their business, and they said, "Well, I'm thinking about retiring in 2 years." Literally, this is what they said. And I said, "Well, great. So what's the plan? What is your, and and they said, "Well, I'm going to retire." And I said, "Well, great, but are you going to sell the company? Is somebody going to move in?" Well, I really haven't. Now, I'm 2 years out, so I'm going to start to look at that now. Well, 2 years is nowhere near enough time. I mean, the minimum to me, when you're thinking about that, is 5 years out.
Yeah.
You got to start planning. Are you going to sell it? Are you going to do an ESOP with your company? Do you have somebody to succeed you? Do you have a family member who might succeed you? And if you do have a family member or somebody in your company that you want to succeed you, are they trained? Are they ready to move into that position? So it's those kinds of things that I think people who are running businesses don't really think about. And then the other thing with regard to retirement is the one thing that they never think about is what's next.
Yeah.
What are they going to do next? Everybody says retire, retire, retire. But they never think about, okay, retire to what?
Right.
And I think it's really critical to spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? Because you're not going to play golf every day. You're not going to sleep late every day. A friend of mine retired, and I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, I got this, this, this." I said, "Great." I said, "So then after that first month, then what?" And that's the issue. Those are the issues.
Those are extremely, extremely good points. In summation, Dick, do you have anything else, any like action statement that you would give anybody, or any tips further for anybody else to wrap this up?
The only thing I would say is that I think you have to be very open-minded. I think you really need to be thinking seriously about what's ahead. I think you need to be learning from the lessons that you've learned in the past, especially from the recession of 10 years ago. And I think, I think to me, again, I think you need to be listening to your people and listening to your markets.
Yeah. Okay. And for any emerging leader, small business owner, CEO out there, looking to up their game, take it to the next level here in the Pittsburgh area, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, you can email me at dicksinger85@gmail.com, or you can call me at 412-576-8049.
Yeah, and obviously you can call the office here. I'd love to connect you with this man. He's made a huge difference in what I do and what our company does, and I've seen him do it over and over again. And I'm going to leave y'all with this quote, very apropos for what you do, Dick. It's from John Quincy Adams. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. And I think that's the epitome of what you do. And thanks for being on today. But that's all for today, folks. We really want to thank you for watching. I hope you get a lot out of it today. Make sure you leave this video a like and leave a comment down in the comment section below. We'd also appreciate if you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell icon to get notified when we post next. If you'd like more information, you can always visit us at centerforvictory.com. And remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. See you next time.